the average time that somebody looked at an application is 7 seconds. So like, what do you want to see in that 7 seconds? But if I get you on the phone and I call you, you and I are having a conversation, we're not talking for 7 seconds. If you give me 7 minutes, you're going to know who I am, right? Like, you're going to understand those things.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Veteran CEO Magazine, where veterans lead the way. I'm Jay Hernandez, and today my guest is Tim Hoed. Tim is the founder of Major Talent, an organization dedicated to connecting companies with veterans, interns, and military spouses. And he does that by translating military experience into language that's customized for civilian employers. Tim, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to chat today.
So my first question to you, describe that experience in 6 words or fewer for you getting out of the military, and then how you came around to forming Major Talent.
Intentional would be the first one. Proactive, a networker, learner, listen, and then be inquisitive as well. So that's my 6-word pipeline.
So talk to me a bit about intentional. What was your process like deciding to be intentional? What are you seeing with veterans to need to be intentional with their transition?
The intentional portion for me actually started when I was a recruiter. So I volunteered to do that job, and I ended up recruiting out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I loved it. And I knew that from that point forward, I needed to be intentional with my career. I needed to make sure that I wasn't stovepiped into something that wasn't going to be necessarily translatable or marketable in the civilian sector. And that really has carried forward with everything that I'm doing. Like, even my company now, Major Talent, like, everything about it is intentional. The branding is intentional. The platform is intentional, like what it does. So like, just it's easy to get washed up into everything that's happening unless you're intentional, right? So for me, intentional is really how I lead most things in my life, with intentionality.
It's interesting that you pointed out a lot of that started in the recruiting phase, because if you think about so many of the military veterans and the service members, just joining the military had to be a very intentional act. There's a lot of stories of people who perhaps wanted to but didn't quite follow through on it. But the service member community, I forget exactly what the stat is. It's something like 1 or 2% of the entire population actually ends up serving. That's a very intentional group right there. So do you see similarities with just that veteran community because they had to be intentional to join the military on that flip side? Or do you see kind of it start to fall off there?
I look at it from both the onboarding, from the recruiting side, and then the offboarding as well. So like, from a recruiter's perspective, when you onboard, we have to intentionally target people, right? Like, we're qualified morally, academically, and physically. So when I'm looking at moral qualifications, I have to be intentional about what those are. Like, I need to get people that would be qualified morally, right? Like, with the background, whatever that background is. If there's a criminal background, that's probably not going to be something that we can target, right? So like, we have to be intentional with those efforts. The second thing is the intentionality of the academics is also something that's important. So when I was recruiting, I would always look for the most athletic person and the most academic person. And it made me laugh, because a lot of the initial conversations was, those guys are so far out of your league, they're never going to join the Air Force, right? And I'm like, really? But when I get that one athlete, that's the jock of the class, I always get the entire entourage of athletes, and the same thing with the academics. If I get the smartest person in the class, then everybody else is like, dang, if they're doing that, then I have to do it, right? So like, that part has to be intentional. And then the physical, obviously, that's another part. Like, it has to be intentional in those efforts. So like, when we separate, like, it's literally has to be the same thing, like, there's so much intentionality that brought you in. The same thing has to be what we use as we separate. I always use the term, like, use a sniper round instead of a mortar round, right? So like, when we look for those jobs, there's so many of us that we're like, oh man, I can do anything because I had to do everything. And then just lob their resume out there like it's a mortar round. I'm like, if you were intentional about your approach on separating, you're going to get a different result, right? Like, if your resume was tailored, if your resume had the skills that are required in the job description, if you intentionally connected and networked with the people that are holding the job, with the gatekeepers, right? So like for me, intentionality, it literally drives your mission. It can, right? I think we miss a lot on that.
For our listeners who aren't familiar with Major Talent, just describe a little bit about what this company does for them, and then your background on like how you came to see this need for service members and veterans.
What I did is I always look for problems and then I try to provide a solution, right? It's like that's how I'm wired. And I understand the onboarding, I understand the offboarding from the service. It's not just the Air Force. Like my first 4 years, I was a Marine, I was an infantry guy. So I got out. But I grew up on a farm, and my ASVAB scores, my mechanical and electrical, I'm in the top 10%. Like, but that's not for me to brag. But what I'm sharing is like after I got out of the Marine Corps and the infantry, everybody's like, oh, you could be a cop, or you could be in security, and I'm like, there's so much more, right? So when I came to what do I really want to do after I separate or after I retire from the military. So there's a few areas where veterans as a whole, we struggle. The first one is translating our skills. And this is an area where I'm like, when this really made the biggest impact for me is I'm sitting here in my TAC class. And for everybody that's listening, if they're not a vet, that's the Transition Assistance Program, right? So like I'm sitting here in this class, and I am very lighthearted by nature anyways. Like I take very little serious. So me and a buddy of mine, we're just laughing the whole time. And we're writing resumes, and so I've been writing resumes because that's what I've done since I've just helped people write them. And this guy sitting next to me, he's like, he's not looking good, man. And I'm like, are you good? He goes, no, man, I'm not. He goes, I'm a nuclear targeteer. There's nobody in the civilian sector that will hire a nuclear targeteer. I was like, you're right. I was like, however, if you talked about your data analytics and how you could analyze things and how you could quantify things, and you could just see as we started talking like that, like it just kind of broke him down. And he's like, yeah, okay, I got this, right? So that was the first part, was like, how do we translate those skills from what we actually did to what makes sense on the civilian sector? The second thing is we don't have to write resumes while we're in service. We don't have to do it. So I'm like, that's the very subjective piece that we all have. So like, I want to make sure that we have that. Third thing was interviews. The vast majority of people in uniform, we don't have to interview for the next job, right? So I wanted to make that available, and then the job placement itself. So I wanted to do that. So I said, let's build a platform that literally takes care of all four. So our platform does that. It translates your entire military career into skills-based profiles. We offer a skills-based resume. You just, when your profile is done, click on the resume button, you get yourself a skills-based resume. You could take that, shop it, modify it. We have an AI interview feature that's on the platform, which is amazing, because why would what we're being told in TAP is to go find a job that you don't want so you can practice interviewing. I'm like, that's a waste of everybody's time. So why don't I just have this on the platform? And so we have that now, and veterans can go on there. They can practice interviewing for whatever position they want, which is awesome. And then we also have a job map, which is geotagged, so that every position that our partner employers have, the geotag it. So like as a veteran, if I know, hey, how far away from this job am I can map it out. So it's like a Zillow for houses, but it's for jobs. So everything was intentional about how we pushed this company and how we initially had started to get things going. So yeah.
Something that we've certainly heard here, but before at VCEO, is just talking about that runway needed before getting out and trying to look at that, and how that can be a challenge at different points in your career. Somebody who does 20, 30 years, they might be able to have a 3-year runway, but somebody who just does 4 years, 3-year runway is their whole career, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
But knowing that, and I think this is kind of where we're getting to your second word of proactive, being able to take that proactive approach, knowing what your time in the military is doing, and understanding that there will eventually be a transition, whether you're going to be a short-term, single enlisted, single commission term, or if you're going to do a whole career. But there's ideally going to be that transition process at some point. So talk to me about the proactive approach on this?
Proactive is it's definitely it's that like what's next, right? So like we plan everything we do is we plan forward. We do that for like if we deploy, we don't just pick up in the morning and we're gone, right? So like there's a lot of proactive things that have to happen. You get your will in order, you get your bags in order, you pack all the stuff that the must-haves, and then the nice to be's, right? Like what would be nice to have when I'm over. So like we do that with our jobs, we do it with our deployments, we do it with all those things. But the one area that a lot of us struggle with is like that preparation for separation, right? So we're so in the mission that we don't necessarily be proactive about what does that look like. And the proactive side would be, how do I build my network? How do I write this resume? Who do I connect with? Like what are the things, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? There's a lot to unpack in the proactive approach for how we make this transition.
For a lot of people, they're not going to start submitting their resumes for jobs if they've got 2 years left. They're thinking more, okay, when I'm in that, maybe 6 month window. I think it kind of depends on different employers for how long and how quickly they're looking to move. But when we talk about these long runways needed and being proactive, what are things people can really do when they are still a couple years out?
If we start to look at what do we want to do, not what we can do, but what do we want to do, that will help things narrow it down pretty quick. The second thing that I always ask is like, what industry do you want to be in? Because if you're a project manager in a bank versus a project manager in a construction company, those are two different industries. They require different skill sets. So these are things that we have this thought of when we separate. Because I led and managed people, I should be a human resources manager, right? Like if I quantified most people coming out of the military, like they all want to be HR managers and project managers. So I'm like, I get it, but why? So I always dig into the why. So like if we're proactive, another thing, like what do you want to do? Where do you want to be? And then what industry do you want to be in? And then what are those companies in that industry that you would target, right? So not necessarily like what are the biggest companies. We all know what the big names are, but the big names also has the most bureaucratic tape to cut through, right? There's more frustration that comes from saying, hey, I'm going to go work for company X. I'm not going to call anybody out, but it's like so hard to get in there. Yeah, because everybody wants to get in there, right? So like understand the other companies that are in that industry and in the same space. They may not be as big, but they have more flexibility and they have more upper mobility.
I love that your next word here is networking, because what I have found a lot of times is maybe I don't even know what some of those companies are, but by starting to get networked with people in those companies, then I can start to figure that out. I learned so much about my personal transition when I started to meet more people who had gone through it, and I saw, okay, well, where did this person land? Oh, well, so-and-so stayed at this job for a couple of years, and then they moved to this other company I hadn't heard of. What's that company? And I learned a bit more on that. So,
Yeah.
so that was, and I'll tell you right now, like, I hate networking. It's exhausting. Like, it is physically exhausting,
Though, right? Yeah.
for me. But every single person, every single like career counselor I've talked to just talks about the value of networking, and you chose this word for a reason. So what's your perspective, your advice for people on networking and being a networker?
I think a lot of times we overcomplicate what does this word mean? Build your network, grow your network. And then you're going to see the business side where people like your network is your net worth, right? So like we get all those, but what does that actually mean, right? So break it down to, it's very simple. If I'm in a service and I need to go to supply, if I have that one person in supply that always helps me out, guess what? You built your network because that's your go-to person, right? So then you're like, hey, how can I help you? What do you need? You're helping me. How can I do you a solid as well? You do it. We do this and we don't even think about it, right?
Mhm.
So I know one of the jobs that I did is I had the dining facilities underneath me, and it was awesome. But you know what's funny is because when you talk to a maintainer that's coming through the line, they're like, "Oh yeah, Airman so and so was on the grill today. I know I'm getting hooked up, right?" So like they still do portion control, but sometimes it's different because there's a smile that goes with your eggs, or or maybe how they make things are a little bit different. Like, but that's your hookup inside, right? So you're like, hey, my friend is coming through, can I help him out? Like, we do that internally. But when we think about, oh, we got a network to get that next career, a lot of us are like, oh my gosh, what does that mean? I got to learn a whole new skill. No, you don't. You're already doing it. It's like, just reach out to the other companies that, like, if you identify where you want to go, what you want to do, and all the things that we talked about on the proactive side and the intentional side, the networking is going to happen. So then just your veterans that are in there and be like, hey, I'm coming out of here. I need to have a conversation, right? Who's the hiring manager for this? Can you get me a conversation? Can you get me in the door? Who should I be talking to, or who should I avoid, right? Like, people have no problem telling you who to talk to and who not to talk to. So it's just a matter of, like, we just have to ask the question.
I had a really interesting conversation with somebody recently. He did 20 plus years in talent acquisition. My questions to that person were trying to pick that brain on how does somebody really break through the clutter? Like, what is it that on the corporate side you're looking for? When you have all these different resumes and all these different tools to kind of cut that stuff out. And they mentioned something that I thought was really interesting. You can find out who the recruiter is and reach out to them, which kind of surprised me a little bit, because from my perspective, I assume, man, if I'm a recruiter and somebody's just reaching out to me on LinkedIn and sending me messages, I'm probably going to get a ton of those. How do I keep that from just becoming the next amount of junk? And he framed it in this conversation about networking, but specifically kind of already hitting the things you've talked about on being intentional and proactive. He said, I was never looking for someone who was just asking me how to do it, but rather somebody who has already taken these steps and is then reaching out to me, just trying to see, hey, like, I see it requires this specific check mark. And in this case, we were talking about degrees.
Yeah.
He was like, I've got 20 years of experience, but I don't necessarily have that piece of paper. Would you still think my experience is relevant? And it was so fascinating. And he was like, absolutely. Then send me your stuff versus going through that system that's going to automatically turn it down. But by framing it that way, it's networking, it's cold calling, two things that are very difficult to do. But all of a sudden, a door that normally would be closed by doing the normal process now has just that little gap. It's difficult, but that's one of those things that networking can help you do.
That's the human nature, is if somebody's having a problem, by nature, we want to help that person. I think veterans have this amplified, like, you're a vet, I'm a vet, you need help, let me help you. So, like, we are in a world today of, like, everything is all systems and processes. So, like, some companies, they'll open up a job and they'll say, cap this. USA Jobs does this. They'll cap it at like 500, because the reality is, whoever's going to be screening those 500 applications, the average time that somebody looked at an application is 7 seconds. So, like, what do you want to see in that 7 seconds? But if I get you on the phone and I call you, and you and I are having a conversation, we're not talking for 7 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
If you give me 7 minutes, you're going to know who I am, right? Like, you're going to understand those things. And, like, that's the whole part of it. It's just like, if we can have a conversation, I'm going to remember your name. I'm going to remember your experience. But if I looked at your resume, probably wouldn't get anywhere, right? Like, I'm like, cool, next one. And, like, I might be looking for one thing. My partner might be looking for something else. Their partner might be looking for something else. And, like, we miss it. So, like, the networking piece, it's a scary term. Like, it's talked about it as a scary way, but we all do this already.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of, how do you do it? Don't let it scare you, and just let it be a part of it. Like, understand, how do you use it? How do you leverage it? And just ask the questions. So, like, for me, I also recruit. Like, so, like, everybody's like, what are your fastest screening questions? Like, how do you differentiate somebody that's blowing smoke and somebody that's not? And I'll be honest with you, like, it is so simple for me. Like, I take 2 minutes, and within the first 2 minutes, I will know if we need to continue this conversation. If we don't, I ask you, do you want a job or do you want to work? And I just stop talking. And I let the candidate talk at that point, because if they go towards money, they just want a job. If they don't go towards skills, they want to work, right? So, like, understanding that in your network as well, right? Like, okay, so this person wants to just leverage me for financial gain. This person really wants to leverage me for professional gain, right? So, like, understand, ask the right questions, think about what those questions should be and how they could be leveraged, and then just, yeah.
That first question I find for it can be such a difficult one, and sometimes that first question is just tell me about yourself.
Yeah.
And to think in that first 7 seconds, tell me about yourself, the weight that that question can have. There's a method that I got to learn years back, and I love this one. It's called the PEN method. Have you heard of this one before?
What is it? The pen
PEN,
method?
PEN.
Okay. I'm
So
not,
the uh, the approach for the PEN method is passion, experience, next. So
okay.
when somebody asks you, tell me about yourself, who are you, what are you doing, and it's again usually right there at the very first question, you lead by telling people what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
That's what you're there. Like, what is it that drives you when you wake up in the morning? What is it that you're wanting to do? You
Yeah.
follow it up with the experience you have in that area, and you're honest about it.
Yeah.
Whether it's I volunteer on this and I really like that, and I want to get more into it, or I've got 20 years doing this. That whole realm is you're explaining your qualifications for your passion. And
Mhm.
then that last part, closing out, what's next? I want to take my passion, my experience, and translate it into this next step on there.
Yeah.
All said, you should be able to say that within 30 seconds.
Right.
I mean, it's we were given a whole minute to do it, but I think if you really know what your passion is, and you can boil down your experience to a couple of those bullet points, it's I tell everyone I know, use the pen method on that question. For the first question at least. Um, and I've been on the opposite end of that where I get the first question and there's just so much background and it overwhelms me. And because I didn't have that like focus on how to do it, I just started,
Yeah.
you know, going off on anything, not, looking for what I think the right answer is going to be versus
Yeah.
coming in there with a plan on how to answer it.
Dude, I haven't heard of the pen method, but I like it. I wrote it down. I'm going to use that.
Yeah. Oh, man. I tell everyone about it, and I can't take credit for it. I learned it from
Yeah.
someone else, but it's a great method.
Yeah. Nah, it's good, man. I love it.
So now that you've learned something from me, let me go to our fourth word here, learner.
Yeah.
So for transitioning service members, being a learner, to talk to me
Mhm.
about your experience and becoming a learner and why that's such a relevant part for this transition.
Here's the thing, like we operate in our own industry. We operate with our own terms, our own vocabulary, our own, like everything we do is geared towards the military. Like our ranks, our positions, our duty titles, everything is there. So like what does that mean on the civilian sector? So like here's the thing too, like something as simple as opening up a Google account, like learning how do I use Google Forms or Google Sheets, an Excel document, because DoD's contracts with Microsoft, so we're all using that, right? Um, I've had I've had a lot of vets that are like, "Can you help me out with sheets or notes?" I'm like, "Yeah, what do you want to know?" Like things like that. Just ask questions. How do I learn about this? What do you need to know? There's so many classes, there's so many courses that are available. A learner, not just like to or make yourself more marketable, but just to understand as well, right? So when people talk about, hey, what's if there's something new that's going on in the industry, like, hey, why is that important? Why is that relevant? So I think we kind of get away from that too much because especially on an interview type of thing where we expect to, we're expected or we think that we're expected to be the subject matter expert. No, like if we don't know, just say, I'm not sure what that is. Why is that important? When you ask why it's important, then you really get to find out like, are there similarities that maybe I already have to this that I just haven't highlighted? So
hmm that's such an interesting thing from the person like looking for that job, and you're supposed to be like the most qualified person to be this expert on there, to then kind of take a step back and realize there's going to be things that I maybe don't quite know. And I've even heard things where that this prevents some people from applying for jobs because they're like, oh, there's stuff that I don't know, but I would need to know. Something that I've heard from countless leaders is they would rather teach someone how to do the job but have the right person there who wants to learn versus somebody who thinks they already know it all, who will then, you know, let that impede them from being able to adapt while they're there on the team.
we see that too, like even in our roles, like we always like if somebody has 80%, like if I am onboarding a company, I will ask them, are you looking for 100%? or are you looking at 80%? Because if you're looking at 80, what are you wanting to compromise on? So like I'll ask that as a recruiter. I'll pick up the phone, I'll do the cold calls like you mentioned before. But that's where a lot of people don't want to do it because it's so far out of their comfort zone. But if you're in an interview and they're talking to you, they're like, "Do you have any questions for me?" Like that's a great interview question. Like, are you guys hiring 100% or 80%? And if you're hiring 80%, what's that 20% that you're willing to compromise and teach somebody on? And that will tell you probably more about the company and more about the person. Because if they don't know, you're walking into a hot zone, right?
Oh, it's such a good point too, is understanding that during the interview process, you're also interviewing the company.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street.
Oh, it is. But you know what? Like we go down that path of almost desperation, and we're like, oh, I need this job, or whatever. So, which
Mhm.
my other word was listen, right? Like learning, listening. Like listening is my next one. There is like understanding, like right when you're trying to learn from them, but also listen to what it is that they're actually saying. Like why are you saying the things that you're saying, and is it really important? Is what I'm saying matter? Because if you're following it up with a clarifying question, did I not say it, or did I say it and you just didn't hear it? Like what happened on that?
Any tips for people just on being a good listener in this job search process?
I think that we all talk about that. Like a lot of our leadership academies, and like NCO Academy does this, and like some of the officer academies, they do the same thing, where they say just ask the question back, you know, because one, it engages you back, it lets them know what you heard. Um, that's for me. I find that is the easiest, right? Like because I don't necessarily do a great job of listening all the time. I will admittedly say like that's probably a area of improvement for me. So, but it's like we have to listen, right? Because if I don't listen, I don't give you the answers that you're asking. I don't give you the products that you're looking for. I don't give you the results that you're looking for. So this is why I'm like, hey, can I clarify that? Can I? This is what I heard. Is that what you want? Type of thing. So for as we go through, like if that's an area of weakness for us, just understand what that weakness is
Mhm.
and really dig into listening to what they're saying. And because again, we don't, as humans, don't like to talk about our problems, right? But when we are interviewing for something, we're interviewing to solve somebody's problem because they have an opening, right? Like they're not just going to hire people because we want to hire people. It's a good thing. It's a nice thing. Like, no, we have a problem and you're a potential solution, right? So like if we don't listen to what their problem really is, so and that's okay, right? So like when I do sales, I try to go why 3 deep. I'm like, why is this? Why is that important? And then what, like I try to do that. But it's the same thing if we can ask the same thing on a from an interview perspective. And if we're listening, why is this position open? You know, why is it important to fill it? Like why are you talking to candidates with my experience with it? Like you're going to find out if they're actually trying to solve the problem or if they're just checking a box on somebody that had left, or if they hadn't. So like when you start
Mhm.
asking those types of questions, and I know that feels way off track for people, but it's super
Um,
helpful.
it could also help just with the standing out aspect of somebody who is deep diving into the whys. That's going to stand out more than somebody who just straight answer, if they've got lots of candidates who have the different ones on there. It leads to your final point here on listening, but being inquisitive,
Yeah,
and the importance of being inquisitive as you go through this transition process.
yeah.
Talk to me a bit about why that you chose this final word.
I have kids, man. My kids are a little bit older now, right? But when they were young, I always tried to like not shut them down when they kept asking why. So I think that there's a time where you could figure out when you're saying why just to try to be funny, and when you're saying why because you're really trying to understand. So like the more questions that you can ask, if somebody is willing to give you their time, right? So like these things all tie together for me. Like I will intentionally look for people that have expertise in the industry. So we talk about folks, and if I can back up a little bit on these and just kind of tie them together, like when I talk to folks that are in the industry, we say, talk to a recruiter. And normally what we think of is we're thinking a corporate recruiter, right? But what happens when you talk to an executive recruiter? So if I'm an executive recruiter, like there's a difference in the types of recruiters, right? So an executive recruiter, for example, if I want to get into the finance world, and if I talk to an executive recruiter there, they are not connected to one financial institution. They have a geographic footprint of people that they've been talking to. So if I said, hey, I want to do this, and I'm going to talk to somebody that's been doing in this industry for 15 years, why would I not talk to an executive recruiter who has built those relationships with every single financial institution, right? And I can dig into those. So like I'm intentional about who I'm talking to. I'm asking the questions, I'm listening, but I can keep digging in. Like the inquisitive side of asking the questions. If somebody's going to give you time, buy them coffee. Like it's the best $2 you're going to spend, right? Buy them coffee, because then, you know, they're not, you're not just milking them for everything they're worth. You at least gave them a cup of coffee, but then ask them the questions, like dig in. Why is this important? Why has that been a pain point? What have you guys seen? Like, why do they not hire veterans? If they are hiring veterans, like how long do they, like, what's the retention rates? Like, be inquisitive on those things, because if you talk to one corporate recruiter, you're going to find out their corporate business. If you talk to an executive recruiter, you're going to find out the industry's business.
Mm.
So, and there's a difference, right? So again, it goes back to like, be intentional about like, where do you want to work? What do you want to do? What industry do you want to be in? And then find the people. Don't find the people that have one connection in there. Find the people that have 100 connections, and ask a lot of questions.
It's such an important part on being willing to ask questions. And, you know, I just want to say thank you so much as we've gone through your whole journey and advice for other veterans. Last question for you is just, you know, what closing advice would you have for the listeners and readers at VCEO?
Don't be afraid to find or to move. I'm a big advocate for small business. I'm a big advocate for startup business. I'm a big advocate for the small and medium, because that's literally what drives everything, right? So, and I'll give you an example of that. I know somebody very close to me. They're a founder. They do really well, and when they're doing things that are so awesome, that you have the biggest players in the industry that are reaching out to them saying, hey, can we partner with you? That's what's cool, right? Because when you start working with those small businesses, you're like, hey, I want to learn this, I want to grow, I want to do whatever. Like, we always go that. But when we start to look for the jobs, we normally will gravitate towards the big names. Do some research. We got to do the digging in, and don't be afraid to try something different, right? So yeah, just get out, have fun, network, advocate, and don't feel like you have to solve all the problems on your first job, because the average vet changes jobs 3 times in the first 5 years.
It's a huge process. Well, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to come on to VCO today, sharing your experience, sharing your advice with our veterans. Really appreciate you being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
This is Veteran CEO Magazine, where veterans lead the way.